and rent deportations, it does not provide a comprehensive solution for addressing the economic impact of illegal immigrants in this country.
Thank you. Final question of this segment, directed at Mr. Cortese. Official United States military policy does not permit openly gay or lesbian persons to serve in the military. What is your party's stance on don't ask, don't tell? And what, if anything, ought to be done about it? 3 minutes.
Well, if you're asking about our party's stance, I would like to read a quote by Senator John McCain. I'm immensely proud and thankful for every American who wears the uniform of our country, especially at a time of war, and I believe it is a mistake to repeal this policy. Basically, what the Republican policy is stating is if it isn't broke, do not fix it. Now, the Democrats have repeatedly said that this policy is broken, and I basically do not see how it is broken, for it basically states that you can, if the military is not going to ask you, and you don't have to make it known. Now, that doesn't prevent gays from serving in the military, it just prevents them from flying flags that they are. Now, I'd like to point to flags. Point to a March 2010 poll of the Military Times, polling over 3,000 active service members, asking them, do you favor or oppose allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly in the military, resulting in 51% opposing, while just 24% are in favor, and the rest remaining neutral or declining to answer. Now, this simply states that most of our current servicemen are not comfortable with this, or are comfortable with the policy as it is now. So I would like to reflect back to Senator McCain's statement: if it isn't broken, do not fix it.
2 minutes, Mr. Kaufman.
Perhaps don't ask, don't tell is broken. It's wrong. It is wrong to deny Americans the ability to serve in their military openly, freely, and proudly because of their sexual orientation. It is despicable that in this great country, such a prejudice can still be considered acceptable. Quite simply, saying that, oh, gays can serve in the military, as long as they don't tell anyone, isn't good enough. It infringes on our fundamental right to free speech, expression, and association. It also saying that don't ask, don't tell isn't broken, and gay people can still serve in the military, no problem, is a complete lie. The military has continued discharges of gay service members. It's just, I cannot see any reason for defending this. That poll you referred to of servicemen asking if they were comfortable with gay serving in the military, well, you know, people resisted integration of the armed forces. It has to come to a point. I personally saw a poll which asked if members of the military believed that having a gay member in their unit disturbed unit cohesion in any way. The majority replied no. Quite simply, this is an issue of government-sponsored discrimination against a group, and it is unacceptable in this day and age and in this country.
1 minute.
Well, at first I'd have to ask what poll was that, but in any case, I'd like just to point to the fact that this is basically an attempted social engineering in one of the pillars of our national security. Now, is this a safe thing to do, social engineering, basically a social experiment, to put it in at a time when we are combating terror all over the world? The answer is no. Frankly, when it comes to don't ask, don't tell, I think it's worked well in the past, and we ought to leave it alone, and that's all I'm going to say.
I find that argument very, very flawed.
You're out of order, sir. It's now time for our closing statements. Well, maybe you weren't so out of order. Now you have your closing statement for 2 minutes.
Well, I would just first like to address the last point brought up, that calling this social engineering in our defense is just a ridiculous last-ditch effort to deny Americans a basic right. People call integration of the Army social engineering in the military, and we shouldn't do it, but that seems to have worked out quite well. I would like to conclude by saying that Democrats support policies that provide rights for Americans, provide them with the services they need, and provide them with the measure of knowing that the government supports them. On immigration, that we need to accept the fact that illegal immigrants are here. They're here to stay. They've been here for quite some time. We need to provide a path to legalization. On education, we need to reform our public school system and not just give up on it. We need to provide reasons for people to become teachers, because education is one of the most important things in any nation. We need to regain our place in the world by producing great scientists, mathematicians, engineers, and we need to do this by funding our public education system, not just throwing it under the bus with a voucher system. On issues of gay rights and Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it is just quite simply despicable that we continue to allow prejudice in this area. On the issue of marriage equality for homosexuals, why should they be denied the right to live a happy, free life away from government-sponsored discrimination? Quite simply, Democrats support the rights, privileges, and protections of Americans that have been protected for hundreds of years and should not be backed down from. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to address the problem of illegal immigration first and then move on from there. It is the community of citizens who consent to be governed and for whom the government exists. The principal responsibility of the government is to us, the citizens. Otherwise, the government ceases to be legitimate. And to say to us citizens who are primarily responsible for our nation's character and culture that we are less valuable to American society than the illegal immigrants is pure nonsense. We must protect our nation's sovereignty for the sake of being a nation of laws, if anything. Now, he said that the Democratic Party is a party of equality. Now, the United States is a nation of equality. What the Republican Party is advocating is upholding the law in terms of illegal immigration by enforcing laws that are already in place to make Americans safer and more secure. Now, moving on to educational reform. I would just like to repeat what I said, that giving Americans the choice is the way to go, and increasing responsibility of the individual school's administration by giving parental oversight, which is right there in the community, rather than some far-off bureaucrat in the state capitol or in Washington, D.C. Now, moving on to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I can tell that this is a very sensitive issue, and if anything, it should be left up to our armed forces, and they have clearly spoken on the issue which is prevalent to them. Thank you.